and welcome to another episode of Ice World. I'm Nadia Frontier, and in this podcast, I speak to the ordinary people who do extraordinary jobs in the polar regions and who make sure that the work at the British Antarctic Survey continues. In this episode, we continue to discover more about the behind-the-scenes preparation that goes into an Antarctic contract. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Emma Pearce. Emma is a glaciologist, and over the past couple of seasons, she has spent a lot of time out in the deep field in Antarctica. So who better to speak to about how to protect yourself against the cold in the most extreme conditions when only living out of a tent? But first, Emma, welcome to the podcast. Can we start by introducing yourself, and can you talk us through a bit of your journey about how you got to work with the British Antarctic Survey?
Hello. Thanks, Nadia. So, as you said, I'm a glaciologist, but my background is actually in geophysics. So I started out by doing a degree in geophysics because I really liked maths and physics and I really liked being outside. I tried English, tried all these creative subjects, and they just did not work with my brain. But the precision of maths and physics I got on with that. So I had a Google and saw which subject gave you the most international trips and the most opportunities to be outside. And geophysics came up. I was like, great, that sounds like my cup of tea. So I did geophysics. And then I got to the end of my degree and thought, I don't think I'm ready for a real job. And started perusing the landscape of PhDs. Not that they're not a real job, but they just seemed more exciting. And there was one that was using all my geophysics methods, but applying it to Antarctica. I was like, wow, okay, this is exactly what I want to do. And I applied and I was really lucky and I got it. And that was where the world of glaciology opened up. And I now definitely see myself as a glaciologist instead of a geophysicist because I love it. I really enjoy the glaciology side of things.
Can you just briefly explain the difference between geophysics and glaciology? Like, how are those disciplines different and exactly what is geophysics?
So the way I like to see it is that glaciology is understanding the behaviour of ice, how it behaved in the past, what it's doing now, and possibly how it's going to change into the future. And the geophysics aspect of that is really understanding the physical properties of the ice and being able to extract information about what's going on inside the ice. So what's the ice crystal structure like? Is there any fractures in the ice? What temperature is the ice and what's going underneath it? All of these things the geophysics gives us. So we use it almost as a toolkit to really understand the glaciology.
Has Antarctica always been on your radar? When you were in your bachelor's, did you know about the polar regions? Was it something you were thinking of as a geophysicist?
No. In all honesty, the university I was at was very oil and gas focused. Geophysics traditionally was an exploration industry skill set. I'd done a placement at an oil and gas company, and I got through the placement because I knew the placement was going to end, is the way I would refer to that experience. It was great. It was good to use my skills, but it wasn't for me. And I think I felt maybe a little bit lost at the end, thinking that oil and gas wasn't where I wanted to go, but I didn't really know what my skill set could go towards. And I think now there's a really big push that geophysics is really important in the world of sort of like the environment and climate change and all of these industries. But at the time that wasn't really recognised. So then when I saw this glaciology position, at that point, I probably couldn't tell you the difference between the Arctic and the Antarctic, but I thought it sounded like a really cool opportunity. And I just thought, what a great way to use my skill set in a role that gives me purpose and motivation and a job that gives me satisfaction rather than just sort of churning the wheel. So no, I really didn't know what Antarctica was or where it was.
Wow, that's amazing. And then when you learnt about Antarctica and you started to move towards glaciology, do you remember that transition, and what was it that really caught your attention?
Yeah, it was overwhelming, I think, going from this very structured oil and gas regime to this world of glaciology where, I suppose the world of research as well, where actually sometimes things are underfunded versus oil and gas. The techniques we were using were quite maybe 2-3 years behind, at best 2-3 years behind compared to what we were seeing in the exploration industry. That was quite a shock, that this subject that is so important and really essential to the future of society isn't being funded. And then actually going to Antarctica and seeing that everyone there had the same mentality as myself and being like, oh, it's not just me who wants to go to these places and have these experiences and have a purpose and really contribute towards society. So, yeah, I felt recognised for the first time, I think, compared to my degree, like going into this area of research, I just felt at home.
Amazing. That's so nice. So when did you first get to go to Antarctica then?
So my PhD was set to start in October 2017, and in August of 2017, so the month before, my soon-to-be PhD advisor emailed me and said, "Hi, Emma, I don't suppose you'd be up for going to Antarctica in October. I can't make it. Can you go on my behalf?" And this is little me having never been on field work. And he's like, "Yeah, I just need you to lead the geophysics for this deployment." I was like, "Oh, yeah, sure, why not? I can do that." So yeah, that was quite overwhelming. So I turned up for my PhD in Leeds, had a couple of weeks, and then was back down south at Bass, getting ready to go, and packed with my radar in one hand, some seismometers in the other, and off I went.
You are joking?
No.
Mental.
Yeah, thrown in at the deep end, I think, is the best way to explain it.
Yeah, right. Wow. And so did you have to go through that whole process at the British Antarctic Survey of pre-deployment training and getting a kit fitting and having all your polar clothing ready?
Yeah, and I was just completely like, where am I? What is Antarctica? Why are we in Cambridge in a college for a week learning about gloves? I was like, what do you mean? You just get your gloves from Primark, don't you? Yeah, it was a complete... although I loved like being outside and outdoors, I wasn't traditionally outdoorsy. I hadn't grown up going on like family hikes and this sort of thing. So it was a real drop into the deep end, and I was very enthusiastic. I was so enthusiastic and so naive, but I was ready to absorb all the information and how many layers I should wear and how cold it's actually going to be.
Emma, that is an intense first month of your PhD. Absolutely fair play to you. So where did you go during this first month and what project were you working on?
So I was on a project called Race 68, and it was to do with a large iceberg that had broken off of the Larsen Sea ice shelf. And the reason that my deployment was so last minute was because the whole project was last minute. It was opportunistic that this massive iceberg had broken off of the ice shelf, and we wanted to get some geophysics to understand if the process of this large iceberg breaking off had caused any sort of remnant damage in the remaining bit.
So then when you first went down to Antarctica, how long did you spend there on the Larsen Sea ice shelf?
So we left in October, and I think in total I was away for I got back just before Christmas. And in true Antarctic style, we flew to Chile, and everyone was talking about how, oh, if you're lucky, you might get a day in Chile. I had 2 weeks in Chile because of problems with aeroplanes, which did mean I got to meet my now boyfriend, who was also travelling down to Antarctica at the same time and was also stuck in Chile for 2 weeks. So 7 years later, I can claim it was not just the Antarctica. So we had 2 weeks in Chile, and then we flew into Rothera, where I had a month or so based out of Rothera, but doing flights to Larsen Sea ice shelf, where we would spend a couple of nights out on the ice shelf and then come back. Because this large iceberg had broken off, and the whole point of our project was to look at the stability of the bit that remained, we weren't overly happy with the idea of just us two being there on our own in case the geophysics actually showed that the ice shelf was really unstable, because the neighbour of this ice shelf back in 2002 had a similar process where a really, really large iceberg broke off, and then the whole remainder of the ice shelf just collapsed, like disintegrated. So we wanted to try to see if this ice shelf was going to do the same thing. It hasn't done the same thing.
Okay. So, and what was that extra safety measure if there was just two of you on that ice shelf in order to, if you had potentially results showing instability?
So we had to have an aeroplane with us the whole time, just in case if we saw things that weren't good, we could fly out. The decision was that we would do lots of short trips for a couple of nights, have the aeroplane with us. If we saw things that weren't good, we could fly home, which is a really, really good idea until you try to fly home and it turns out your plane's frozen to the ice shelf. And then you spend 2 hours trying to get it out of the ice. We'd done the science and we were like, let's go home now. And the plane was stuck.
Very, very Antarctic experience. So, okay, that's almost 10 years ago, that experience during your PhD, but yet that didn't deter you from the polar regions and has potentially had quite the contrary effect. So what happened once you had finished this massive, obviously, period of PhD research? Then where did you go?
So I did the research for Antarctica for my PhD, and then actually a lot of my other research for my PhD was based in Norway. So I did a few field trips up to Norway that I loved. I really loved getting the data and being able to understand what the ice was doing. And I realised that was the part of my research that I enjoyed more than method development, I suppose. It was the understanding how ice and glaciers flowed or broke or whatever they were going to do. So then I got to the end and I thought a postdoc wasn't for me, mostly because I hadn't had the strongest PhD in the world. You know, we like in academia, there's a lot of imposter syndrome and you often convince yourself that research isn't the world for you. But a postdoc came up in France that was doing exactly the techniques that I had done and worked on for my PhD, but looking at Greenland. And I was like, I could do Greenland. It was just after COVID. So I applied and again, like really lucky, got it. And then it was just after Brexit as well. So it was the whole ordeal of moving to France as a non-EU citizen. And sadly, I didn't get to go to Greenland in that because the project was on a sort of limited, like essential people only because of COVID. But it meant I got to work on data from Greenland for a couple of years over in France and carry on this understanding of a different type of ice. So this wasn't an ice shelf, it was an ice stream. So more inland and flowing above rock, but keep using geophysics and keep applying those techniques.
And then next postdoc, British Antarctic Survey.
Yeah, so then
and here you are.
Here I am, and it's the classic, it's the dream for a glaciologist, for a geophysicist. I remember my PhD advisor asking me during my PhD what my long-term goals were of research. Like, what did you want to do? And I was like, well, I want to work at BAS, you know, I want to be there. And so I saw a project come up again, looking for a geophysicist. It felt like a real step up. It was to lead the geophysics of a project. So my first month of my PhD was not leading the geophysics. That was just holding my head above water. But this was, you know, planning a deployment, going, like organising it all, running the project. And I was like, I'm ready to do that. I can do that. I've got the skill set. I've got the experience. So applied. And then again, it was started the job in October, off to Halley Research Station in November. So a real quick turnaround, like moved back from France, didn't have a house, was living at the campsite and was like, right, okay, Antarctica for 3 months, let's do this.
Emma, this story is absolutely wild. And I hope it's very inspiring for people to also understand the instability of academic career journeys.
Yes.
Of course, there's lots of planning that goes into polar operations, but that's not always possible if you're working on really, really dynamic systems that you need that real-time data when significant events happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the project that I was doing, that I've been working on at BAS, we are looking at a crack on the Brunt Ice Shelf called Halloween crack, which is really important to try and understand this process of ice shelf fracturing, because in the same way that with Larsen C, we didn't really know what was going to happen after that big iceberg broke off, we still don't fully understand this process of fracturing in ice shelves, so much so that it introduces one of our largest uncertainties in our predictions of sea level rise. So the opportunity to have a crack on an ice shelf where we have a research station that is actively growing and changing, where we can deploy geophysics at the very, very tip of that and try to really parameterize those conditions, is such a unique opportunity that, yeah, we have to just be ready to go, I suppose.
And are you a glaciologist in this world, or are you a geophysicist?
Yeah, at BAS, I'm a geophysicist. In geophysics world, I'm a glaciologist. So it just depends who I want to impress.
I like that. So that was the 2024-25 summer season in which you actually recovered the cores?
Yeah, so we did 2 seasons down at the Brunt Ice Shelf. So the first season was a lot of trial and testing. So we were drilling and recovering ice cores, and we weren't too sure how that process was going to work on the Brunt Ice Shelf. The Brunt Ice Shelf is actually relatively warm for an Antarctic location. In the summer, there's a lot of blue sky days, there's a lot of low wind. It's a really, really beautiful place to do field work. And it doesn't that's not something you often think is going to be a problem, that something might be too warm. But with drilling ice cores, it was kind of an unknown that maybe when we recover the ice cores, it might get a bit wet, things might get a bit soggy. We weren't sure how that process was going to work. So we had a year of trialing a lot of the techniques and learning how to drill. And then the following year was the real main season where we were out for 6-7 weeks out in the field, just no one else around us, just hard grinding, ice cores, seismic, geophysics, the lot. So we recovered a lot of cores actually in the trial season, and we got a lot of useful information out of them as well. So as much as it was testing drilling, it was also really fundamental to sort of getting a good understanding of what the ice is like. The Brunt Ice Shelf is made up of 2 types of ice. It's made up of these really, really hard old blocks of ice that flow off of like inland Antarctica, hit the sea and break up into essentially icebergs. And then those icebergs are stuck together by a type of sea icy glue. And that forms this ice shelf, this floating bit of ice that Halley Research Station lives on. And there's quite a lot of differences between these 2 types of ice, but we don't really understand what it is that makes them fracture in different ways. So Halloween crack doesn't necessarily go just perfectly horizontal through the ice. It sort of avoids these hard old blocks and goes through the bit in between more commonly. But on the Larsen Ice Shelf, the process is the complete opposite. It avoids these the stuff in between and preferentially goes through all the hard stuff. So we're just trying to get a good understanding of the basics.
So you're on a 3-year postdoctoral research position at the moment. Will you be going back down again to Halley to continue working on the Rift Tip project?
No. So the Rift Tip project is done. This Christmas is my first Christmas at home in 3 years. So during my postdoc, I actually also went to Antarctica on another project as a last minute replacement because someone couldn't make it and they needed a geophysicist. Who knew? And I was like, yep, cool, thinking I possibly wouldn't get the opportunity to go again. Maybe I wouldn't work at BAS. So I absolutely snapped up that chance. But then 3 winters away, UK winters away, I am very content to be having a Christmas at home this year and really looking forward to the whole process of dark mornings, dark evenings. What a novelty.
Okay, well, I mean, I don't relate to that, but fair enough. I suppose it is nice to have Christmas at home, but not enjoying these dark
No, I know.
Dark mornings.
Give me a month and I'll be like, oh.
So on to polar clothing, Emma. This will obviously be something that you encountered during 2017 during your first deployment, but what kind of equipment did you need to actually take down to Antarctica aside from your Primark gloves?
Yeah, they love a layer. So it turns out you don't just want one giant thick coat, you want all the layers you can think of, which again was new to me. They give you these amazing base layers that are so warm, you can just, but breathable. Warm and breathable is so important. So things that you don't sweat in and that you just keep you warm, but keep you cold when you want to be cold. So you come to Cambridge during this week of training and they take you up to the storeroom where it's normally quite warm. And then they bring out all these clothes to make sure they fit you. And you're trying on layers and layers of clothes in the UK September. So maybe it's 20 degrees. You're sweating and sweating and sweating. You can't move for love nor money because the clothes are so big. And I'm 5'2", and a lot of polar clothing is made for very, very tall, very, very wide men. And since 2017, I've seen there's been a massive improvement in actually buying clothes that fit and are made for women. But in 2017, that was not the case. Everything was men's clothing for men, and we just hoped that a woman could fit into it. So I was swamped.
In just these really baggy layers. So you've got your base layers, which are typically made of merino wool. So that's like wicking the sweat away. And then what do we then have on top of then a base layer?
So we then sort of have a light fleece, a light cotton fleece that's breathable and can just keep you a little bit warmer. On top of that, you then probably have another light jacket. So something that's not going to stop the wind or the rain, but is just a good little extra layer of warmth, insulation. On top of that, you have your Paramo trousers, which are sort of insulated, protect against the wind. You put them over your bottoms. They're like salopettes if you go skiing, or dungarees, essentially. On top of that, you'll have another jacket, like a front up zip, keeps you warm. On top of that, you then have a bright orange paramo, so the classic bass jacket that most people associate with sort of Antarctic fieldwork. This is super breathable. As Matt from the source tells me, it acts like an animal's skin. It's really, really breathable, so it sort of can take the moisture of you away, as well as sort of keeping you dry. And then if it's really, really, really cold, on top of your bottoms, you can have down trousers, which are the funnest thing in the world to wear. It's kind of like wearing a giant sleeping bag. And then you, on top of that, will have a big down jacket. And at that point, you're committing to the fact that you probably can't do much science or research because you can't move, but you're definitely going to be warm. Needless to say, you then have your gloves. So you'll have liner gloves and mittens, or different types of gloves depending on what job you're doing. Then you'll have your hat, a buff to protect your face because at least at Halley, it's just below the ozone hole. So if any of your skin is exposed, you're going to be burnt to a crisp because it's 24-hour daylight. So yeah, you've got your buff, your hat, your gloves, your 3-4 layers. On your feet, you've got a good pair of merino socks. So these are, again, sort of wickening, but keep you warm. And then you might have your baffin boots, which are essentially like moon boots, big clumpy boots full of foam, really, really soft. Or if you're doing stuff where you might possibly fall into a crevasse or be in need of getting rescued, then you have your mountaineering boots on, your harness, you're roped up, you've got a helmet on top of this, your ice axes. So yeah, all the layers.
You are complete. And now, so from 2017, we've had the evolution of sizes that fit women a bit better and a bit more snug and have got less of those air spaces. But in terms of the actual layering system of almost about 5 potential layers that you could have on your top, and then we've got 3 layers that you can have on your bottom, has that kind of stayed the same structure over that almost decade?
Yeah, I think even when you look back, 50, 100 years ago, you look at what the scientists were wearing there. And yes, it will probably be more hand-knitted jumpers and a lovely jumper from their grandma that they've taken down. But the process of layering and wind protection versus, we don't need to be dry, it doesn't rain, so you're not getting wet. Everything is sort of protection against the wind or the cold. The process, from 2017, it's really stayed the same. Bass have got it down to a T how to work that layering system. I don't know if it's just geophysics or glaciology, but so much of what we do is digging. And when you're digging, you just get so warm. So it's really important to be able to, as soon as you feel slightly sweaty, take off your layers. We don't have the opportunity to shower when we're on these deep field deployments. So we might be out in the field for 6 weeks. And the last thing you want to do is get hot and sweaty and then not be able to have a shower after. So yeah, being aware of how you're constantly feeling and taking the time to go, I'm cold, I'm going to put on a jacket, and knowing that that's not annoying anyone. It's okay to take that time and take your jacket off. It takes a little bit of getting used to because it is always it's faff, but it's essential faff.
It is, it's absolutely necessary. And how far in the deep field on the Brunt Ice Shelf are you from Halley Research Station?
We're not actually that far. So we took a piston bully, so one of these sort of like snow tractors, as a little traverse out to our field site. And it took about 7 hours to drive from Halley. So I think we're about 60 kilometres away. If you're on Skidoos, you could probably do it in 4 hours, but it's quite a risky travel route because of all the cracks, and we are working around a crack. So the process of getting there, you have to be linked, your Skidoos have to be linked up, and you have to drive quite slowly to make sure you don't fall in anything. So yeah, we weren't miles and miles away, but we were out of contact.
And then, of course, you don't want to just pop back for your shower because it's such a risky process to get there. So you're staying in tents for up to 6 weeks on this ice shelf at your field site?
Yeah, exactly. So we had a mixture of both tents and because we'd also driven from Halley, we managed to take a shipping container with us, essentially, that we converted into our kitchen. And then we had 2 people sleeping in the shipping container and then 2 people sleeping in the tents, which made it a real bougie experience of fieldwork. I've done fieldwork with tents before, which again, it's really nice if you have that space, and they can be quite warm, especially in the morning. They warm up really quickly when the sun is higher. Whereas the caboose, the shipping container, sort of stayed consistently one temperature. That was home. Christmas in the caboose.
Wow, in the caboose. And that's a bit, did you have to do a bit of a pull the short straws for who gets the tent and who gets the caboose? Or did you alternate?
Well, luckily we had a field guide with us and they love sleeping in tents. So they were like, yeah, I'll take the tent. And then we also had an engineer doing deep field work and he was so keen and ready for sleeping in a tent. So we had 2 noble volunteers who just wanted to be in the tent. And myself and Ollie, the PI of Rift It, were like, yeah, we're more than content in the caboose.
And then in the tent, is there enough space to be able to get changed? Because you've got all these layers and like, where are you storing all of these clothing? And of course, you know, if you're up there for 6 weeks, you need to have multiple base layers because they get sweaty, they're going to smell, you're not showering. How does that work?
So because the air in Antarctica is so dry, you don't actually sweat that much. And even if you do, you don't smell. It's a remarkable ability of Antarctica to make you appreciate that you don't necessarily need to shower every day. So we sort of take the bare minimum. We take maybe 1 pair of thermal bottoms per week, 1 pair of thermal tops per week. It's often so cold as well. You sleep in your thermal tops and bottoms. Some people are very, very good at having their sleeping set of thermal tops and bottoms. But actually, when it comes to it, and you have to, the idea of taking them off to get into your new ones for sleeping, half the time you just get into bed and sleep in the ones you've been wearing all day. The thing that's really important to have enough of is socks. As soon as your socks get slightly wet or sweaty, you want to take them off and make sure that you're drying them out and you're swapping your socks regularly, because that is sort of step number 1 to any sort of cold injury is wet socks. So we take essentially a kit bag full of as many socks as you can find and fit in. We then have sort of, 1 set of thermals per week is my regime, how I like to do it. Pants, again, bare minimum. You can't take, 8 times 7, whatever that number is, you can't take that many pairs of pants. That would be the dream. But we get by. And then your jackets and coats and overlayers, you just take 1 of each of those. And again, by the end of the season, they're covered in fuel from skidoos. They're covered in oil. They're covered in every bit of grimy food that you've wiped down the front of yourself. But, they still work and they still keep you warm.
For you, you said also that you hadn't had much outdoors experience. You hadn't been hiking during this whole period. Have you spent much time in a tent outside of Antarctica and done that whole logistics of, recycling your clothes and taking the bare minimum?
I really hadn't before my first season. Since now, yes, like I really love being outside and having the opportunity to go camping. I really trusted in the BAS system, so I didn't actually bring anything extra. I took the essentials that they gave me and knew that they would work, and they do. You don't need anything extra. They can give you the essentials and it's all you need to get by. Now I've done a few seasons, you really learn how to finesse your kit. You learn the little extras that you like to bring that are personal to you, your own hats, your own base layers that you like. I like to bring my little body warmer that is just an extra layer of like down warmth that keeps me extra nice and toasty. You really start to understand like what works for you. Not everything works for everyone. Some people do really like one jacket that other people will never use or never touch. Everyone's different, but there's enough that they give you that you can figure it out and work through it.
And change the layering system. And what kind of temperatures are we also getting on the Brunt Ice Shelf during the summer season where you've got this 24 hours of daylight?
The coldest would be around -16, -20 on a really, really cold day. Normally it hovers around -8 to -6. But again, -8 in Antarctica is more akin to something like not even minus, maybe like 5 degrees in the UK on a cold, wet, miserable winter day in the UK. I'm often colder than I would be in Antarctica. It's likely because I'm not dressed appropriately. Realistically, it's because the wet in the air in the UK it really gets you, and it's moisture that makes you feel cold and hot. In Antarctica, the cold air is one thing, but because it's so dry, it doesn't bite you in the same sort of way as if it was wet.
Are there never times where you have to be exposed to the wind? If you're out there for 6 weeks, you have to be out in the wind. Are you working potentially long shifts collecting data where you actually just get to this point where you are too cold and you have to stop?
Yeah, I would say the wind is actually the thing that often stops work. So whether it's really, really cold, that doesn't stop you doing work. But for geophysics, a lot of what we do is seismic deployment. So we're listening for these small vibrations in the ground. And if it's a really, really windy day, then you can't really do much on that day. The same with drilling. If you're trying to drill and it's super windy, then your tent is probably going to be more at risk of sort of damage, or your drill tower is maybe swaying in the wind. And really windy days mean let's pitch up in the tent and have a day off.
What are you doing in that time off? Do you have laptops and can you process some of the data, or do you just play cards?
Again, on the Brunt Ice Shelf, the weather's so nice that we're all sat there going, oh gosh, can we have a bad weather day, please? Because they're the only days you do get off. You know, you have to make the most of the time you're there. And if the weather's good, you've got to make the most of it. So we had a couple of bad weather days this season. I'm a big crocheter. I got really into crocheting tiny little pigeons, obviously. The most Antarctic of all the birds. We played a lot of bridge and cards. We also did have Starlink with us this season, which was nice to be able to keep in contact with family, but we couldn't have it on all the time. So because it needs fuel, it needs power. So although you have access to the internet, it's not something that is consistently on for us. So we had sort of like an hour in the afternoon where we'd have it on, just message home, message your partners, still alive, still thriving. So on our days off, we might switch it on for a bit longer. We watched a couple of films together. But yeah, a lot of cards were played.
Do you sleep more than your average from having been outside and been physical and exposed to the elements, do you think?
I don't think we do. I think because
no time
for sleeping, must do science. You tend to get quite into, like, if you're drilling ice cores, you really start convincing yourself that, we have to get to an even meter, or we have to get to, if we're at 170 meters, you want to get to 180 meters before you can call it a day. And there's always that target that you're like, let's get to here and then we'll go home. So the days tend to be quite long, but we were really good at having a really good routine. You know, we'd wake up at the same time every day. We shifted our time on the ice shelf to actually be more in tone with the cooler night because of this process of drilling and wanting to make sure the ice was staying frozen at the surface. So I think local time, we were maybe waking up at sort of like 3-4 in the morning, and then we'd go to bed around like 8 p.m. So it's not loads of hours sleep, but it's enough.
Wow, cool. That's really clever to do that. And that does make sense if you can then optimize those weather windows. And you don't need to run on the station routine of having dinner at a set time or helping out in tasks, because you literally are just independent on the ice sheet. And then after this 6-week period, what is it like to then get back to Halley? Is it such an amazing sense of relief?
I think it's the most difficult bit is when you come back to reality, either both going back to a station or coming back to the UK, especially a station like Halley where people, they're quite closed off to the rest of Antarctica. You know, there's no flights in and out in the season. You land and then that's it. That's your 30 people for the whole season. And when we were a team of 4, so the 4 of us left, and then everyone else just keeps on doing their own thing for the 3 months. I am a natural extrovert, but by the end of the season, all I want to do is just sort of have some time on my own, and really it's mentally really quite exhausting. And there's not really that option a lot of the time to just have time to yourself on station. It's very difficult to get a little area where it's just you and you're not going to be disturbed. So I think that's the most difficult thing for me.
It is a challenge. Well, and just to wrap things up, what keeps you going in these freezing cold moments when you're in the field?
I always say that I'm really, really lucky to be the scientist on the project, because for me, if I work extra long days or if the project's really hard, I get to come home with that data and I get to then spend a year, 2 years, like really processing that and understanding it and really learning about what the ice is doing. I feel for the people who don't have that lure and that pull to get them through the difficult times, if it's just a long day for them. And I'm very conscious of that and try to make sure that we all know that without everyone who goes to Antarctica, the data isn't possible, the science isn't possible. And fundamentally, that's why we're there.
It's a reward at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've done projects where I've been not invested in the data. I'm not using the data at the end of the season. And it is definitely harder. It's really hard to understand the frustrations of delays and to understand the frustrations of logistics and all of that when there isn't the reward of getting that data at the end of it, it definitely makes it harder.
This is such an interesting perspective. Emma, thank you so much. And thank you for running us through all the clothing layers. And good luck in your last year of postdoc.
Thank you so much. Thanks for listening.
So, now you know one thing you definitely won't have to worry about when heading to Antarctica. You're going to be well dressed for the elements, if not the fashion catwalks. Emma is still working at the British Antarctic Survey and is crunching through all the data she has collected in multiple field seasons in her final year of postdoc. And if you are looking for a new role from science to operations, visit bas.ac.uk/jobs/vacancies, where the latest openings are posted. You'll find all kinds of work, including positions you might not expect, but actually may be qualified for. And if you enjoy Ice World, tell us. Make sure you like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, a 5-star review really helps us spread the word. I'm Nadia Frontier, and thank you for listening.